Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for what you all have been waiting for. Your HBCU aunties coming to the stage. It is Tyon and Mia.
Hey. Here we are again, another episode of the Real University with the HBCU aunties here to have a conversation, just a conversation about the things that happen in the real world that affect us, our students, our parents, and the world around us. Today, we're going to discuss a topic that I think we're going to go in a little different direction. I woke up this morning to a message from my sister, God bless her, with regards to some quarantining regulations that have been sanctioned in the state of New York. And it got me thinking about how social media affects, but not necessarily affects people, but more so just the thought process around the things that we see online. I mean, we have so many things that we know are real, the things that we believe are not real. We've talked about some things that have come to fruition that we thought weren't real, but are. And that particular topic made me wonder, like, what do parents go through? What do students go through when things are happening and it's right there at your fingertips? I mean, I come from a generation where we had 3 news stations. There was no cable in the beginning.
Right.
I come from a generation before me that had no cable, and TV was a new thing for them. And to just think about where our students are and then where our parents are with regards to some of the things that go across our phones nowadays and how much access we have to them and what it really happens. And so I wanted to talk about that because I just couldn't imagine being a student in a city wondering if these things could happen to me. And I couldn't imagine being a parent having a child, and the child could be 35, 40 years old, and just, how do those things affect? And so, Tyon, you brought up something when we talked about it earlier before that I definitely want to just let you just jump right into the idea of it, because that's really where it stems from. And I'm gonna let you have and introduce the topic that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think when we were speaking, when you were tying this all together, I think it led me to the fact that, again, I've kind of been disappointed with our educational system for some years now, because where we've been lacking is teaching critical thinking skills. I know that was a great part of my curriculum from elementary school all the way up to high school. Like, be a thinker. Don't just accept what is in front of you as far as propaganda. Because like we said earlier before we came on here, propaganda has been around since the birth of time. So again, it may have been on a etched in a tablet before. It may have been written on silks with quills and things like that. But now fast forward to a generation where, again, to your point, all of this media is at their fingertips at any moment. So it's understanding and having some discernment about what's real and what's not. And I mean, quite honestly, us being the HBCU aunties, us being the real, we want to talk about what is real. But there's this thing where our kids have not been taught to sift through all of this. I mean, you can do what you can do at home. And I definitely try to, guide my son in that way, to be a free thinker, to question things. But there was also a time within our generation, we weren't supposed to question anything because we didn't want to seem disrespectful in that. Well, again, you don't obtain knowledge if you don't study. And part of studying is asking questions.
Correct.
So it's one of those things where we have to literally like take a step back and kind of pick through what it is that we're reading and what it is that we're seeing. And that comes with discernment. And some of that has to be taught, and some of that has to be learned on its own. I was also compelled to share something that I had heard this morning on one of the newscasts that I happened to be listening to early this morning. And it was around how our kids are very intelligent, but it's where their intelligence comes from, because it's information that's there for them. So they're very well informed, but they lack wisdom. And you can only garner wisdom through experience. they're not experiencing much. They're reading about other experiences. They're not experiencing. They're reading about other experiences. And to that point, going back to bringing all of this together and what's real is some of those experiences could be stories. What is all, what is outlined in fact? So it's, as a parent, I can discuss these things with my child if my child feels like that's something worthy of discussion, because quite honestly, if that's something that he wants to deal with on his own and does not include me in the conversation, then he's developing his own perceptions. But then when I come back around and I say, well, did you think about it this way or did you think about it that way? No, but I didn't think to have the conversation with you. They're also not seeking out that wisdom. They're not going to people asking those questions. They're taking everything at face value. And that's the problem that I have with social media, because a lot of that is not factual. It's just
right. Not. Which brings me to what I've been saying it for a long time. I probably picked up this little thing that I started saying it in college, the perception versus reality.
Yes.
The perception versus the reality. Now, back then, who knows what made me start saying it all the time. Obviously, I'm not the originator of the statement because it came way before me. But what I recognize in this world that we live in today, the perception of social media and things that happen online or on social websites, news, whatever, even the news, I will never forget. Where was I? I think I was out of school. Nancy Grace. I used to love Nancy Grace. I just thought she was just so hella ignorant. I don't, just like I used to like Howard Stern. Anyway, another conversation. And Nancy was reporting the weather. And the screen fell behind Nancy. And you realize that this weather that Nancy was reporting, it wasn't real. Propaganda is the word you use. I say perception versus reality. That discernment word that you use is a great one, because unfortunately we have so many things at our fingertips. We don't know what's real versus fake. I take on the perception of what I can't control, I can't control. People who really know me know that I'm not one who dives into the news. I have people whose days begin and end with the news, and I'm like, why would I want to pour that energy that's always bad into my day when life is going to hit me no matter which way I go, right? Not that I want to be ignorant to what's going on around the world, but when I realize that even the news is being reported to me about what's going on around the world is false, I said, well, hold up, wait a minute, we got to figure this out. So social media and the things that you see, you don't know which way to go. And I said this before. I remember when the whole idea of what COVID was going to be came around. No one believed it, and look what happened, right? So even if we have a certain level of discernment, you just don't know. But my take on it is, once it becomes a reality, how do you deal with it? And to your point, it's that cognitive process. Like, how do you think through what's in front of you? What steps do you take to deal what now has gone from perception to reality? Because I think that that's the part that's missing. It's one thing for me to go out and see somebody who I follow or I like online and they look so gorgeous in real life, and then you see them without all the glitz and glam and the makeup and they look a hot mess. It's another thing to see on the news that these things are happening and you doubt it, and then you walk right into it and you realize, oh my goodness, this is real. Two totally different things. What has to happen is the ability to be able to determine how to, I say, pivot or how to move once those things happen. That's what I think out of everything I really wanted to get the point across in this conversation is, forget what you see. How do you deal with it?
And to deal with it, though, again, it's that perception, it's that intuition, it's tapping into your spirituality. It's, you know what, this is happening in this moment. What's the best way for me to react to it? And that's where your gut instincts come in. But that also comes with having discernment. That also comes with having critical thinking skills.
Right.
So again,
as a parent, how do you deal with that?
as a parent, how do you deal with that? Because I mean, and there's different parenting styles. You know that from
Right.
how we were both raised. I had a different upbringing. So I had to be always on. And you have called me out a couple of times about how I have to always be on. Yes, you. Yes, you. How I always have to be on. How I have to like, quite honestly, my perception of being a adult Black woman is I can't make mistakes. See, there was no room for error when in my growth. So when I had to raise a child, I'm trying to raise him like, dude, you only got one shot. You can't make no mistakes. You got to be up on it. Your perception, all points on, head on the swivel all the time. And I was getting frustrated when he didn't react in that way. But it's like, okay, his reality was so much different from mine. But at the same time, again, my wisdom is kicking in and saying, okay, then if he's not always going to be highly perceptive, then he needs to understand the spaces and places that he goes and make sure that they're safe. But how does he do that when he does not have that wisdom? So it's always a cat and mouse game all the time. But what I will say is stay close to your children, or put them in a position where they have a community to stay close to them. And if I had to bring that full circle as to why I sent him to an HBCU, is because I know that in those situations when I'm not there, I feel like there is that community there to reach out and pull him back in, or to say, wait a minute, hold up, watch out. Or he could be the one, which he has proven to me, to say, hey, bruh, watch out. Something's about to happen.
That's not it. Right. Yeah,
so
I think you mentioned the differences in how we were raised. As an adult, I can go back and look at the moments where my father just sat back and let me make decisions that might not have been the wisest. And I'm talking about decisions as an adult, and we're talking about decisions as a kid. Did he let me hang myself? No. But did he let me learn the lesson? Yes, because I had to learn the lesson, right? But I've noticed, and I'm gonna bring it back around to the social media space. A lot of parents try to block what their kids see on social media, which is the same or the equivalent to when our parents, my mother was adamant about not letting me see rated R movies unless it was she had previewed it first, right? I look at it in the same way, but it's almost kind of like you can't really monitor it because that phone, I mean, what you gonna put, you just gonna lock the whole thing, you can't even use it to call anybody, because that's what you would really have to do, because there's so many different outlets and so many different ways and so many different messages, subliminal messages. And I'm gonna get to this one. I went down the soapbox on some station I was watching, and there was this episode, there was a show that talked about the subliminal messages that Nickelodeon shows had. I don't even know how I fell down this rabbit hole and got to the show. I couldn't even tell you the name of it right now. But as an adult looking at this show, I was like, oh my goodness, this was the connotation that that these ideas derived from. But as a kid, I used to say, well, how many times are they going to slime people? Right? So again, adult, kid, social media has now become what people used to try to protect us from, like the MTVs of the world back then, right? Like MTV was like so over the top, you know, certain things were so over the top back then. But when we look at social media, and I think I want to stop saying social media. I think I just want to say access, for phone access, like access on this phone, access on these tablets. It's so much that you cannot protect anyone from it. It's how do you speak to your students, your kids, your friends' kids about what to and what to not believe on these platforms.
So actually, I had to have that conversation, you know, when my child was 9 years old. And I'm going to go round about how we had to have this conversation. And then again, it goes back to what you were talking about with access. So it wasn't necessarily the phone, but the phone later on played a role in this. Because again, with the internet, on these tablets and things like that,
Right.
the types of things that they're watching and the types of things that they're being fed leads them down a totally different rabbit hole. So I had to have the conversation about, certain viewing habits, if you know what I mean, because they were popping up. And then that child thinking that, oh, this is my first exposure to this type of behavior. Oh my God. And I'm like, wait a minute. First of all, you're too young for that. And second of all, I had to fast forward the conversation to, I need you to understand what you're seeing right now, what you're being fed and what you actually think that you like. This ain't real. And so I found myself having a conversation about sex earlier than I needed to.
Wow.
And then, but that conversation had to come within consequences because, again, the initial contact was at home through the video games. But then when you feel like you have access and I can see I'm being fed things on my tablet and then I can use those same things on my phone, I had to say, wait a minute. Do you understand? You still go to school with this phone. You need this phone in order to get in contact with me if anything happens. And just so happens you lose your phone or somebody else gets access to your phone in school and sees this.
Then you're in trouble. Right. Right.
So again, the thought process. I'm in a position where I can only block but so much.
Right.
I'm in a position where I can't take the one piece that is our connector when we're away from you, but you need to understand what consequences are and understand that being an adult, trying to explain that to a 9-year-old. They just
you must have been talking to what's the fat cat Garfield? You must be talking to a cartoon character.
So at that point, it's okay. So how do I shift the behavior? All right. Every night, give me the phone. You don't need the phone when you're sleeping. Then that way I could go in and monitor. But then it's like, okay, so then when you reach the next level, because you still have to establish some type of trust. You have to have some kind of confidence in them that you trust them because you don't want to hover all of them. Because I can't do that. I can't hover over him right now. I really can't.
Right.
But it's also helping them and guiding them to try to figure out how to make the right decisions. But that also depends on the type of empathy that your child has. Because you might have that child that just absolutely gives no about anything.
But you know what? That's one of the reasons why I appreciate this platform that we have, because one of the biggest things that I know made my heart warm when we came up with this idea was there's so many different ways to address the conversation. And sometimes, it's always different. Like I have one of my line sisters, her daughter, oh, that's my baby, right? I swear this little girl is mine. And she'll call me ready to just go in about her. And I'll be like, hold up, wait a minute, pause. And she'll get mad at me about how I address the conversation. But I'm like, someone has to see it from her perspective, right? Her perception versus her reality, because you're reacting as a mother, and somewhere in my spirit I still have that little kid in me that's like, hold on, wait a minute, you're talking about it from your ideals, but think about where she's coming from, right? And so my desire that parents, people, even children get is that there is an adult for the children out there that your village, that you can have a conversation with, that's not going to go from 0 to 1,000 and go ape crazy because you're bringing up a conversation, or your response or reaction to a conversation is one thing when all you're doing is asking questions, trying to get clarity, right?
Go ahead.
Giving parents an opportunity to say, well, shoot, maybe I need to let you talk to your auntie, or I need to let you talk to your cousin who got some sense, or I need to let you talk to somebody because I don't have the capacity, or there's a communication blockage there that I just can't get through to my kid. I want them to hear me, but maybe they need to hear me through someone else. So that's the reason why this topic, not being social media per se, but how do you have these conversations to help them navigate through the things that they see that are real versus not real?
And I'm going to jump in on a couple points there, because that's traumatic for me, because in my upbringing, I couldn't go talk to other people because the conversation got back to my mother, and my mother always wanted to control the narrative. I didn't feel like I could be free in my thoughts because I had to be a certain way. So my trauma allowed me to look at how I was raising my child and say, okay, one, I want you to be able to come to me, but we always say that. We always say that, but still, that's your mom. There's certain, I mean, and I applaud those who have the relationships with their kids that they can come talk to them about anything. But I made sure I employ my village. I'll say, listen, something has happened. I don't know. I can't reach him right. Call him. Talk to him. I'll say, call your Uncle Pro. Call your Uncle Bro. Like, I will say, do that. I need help with that because I had to realize that I didn't know how to relate to a little boy.
A boy.
When he popped out, I looked at him and was like,
what I'm going to do with this?
Exactly. I'm like, well, I even said that. I'm like, what we going to do now? But I didn't know how. But I also know that I was the big cousin to my little cousins. And I knew the role that I played in their life, and I knew that was less motherly. It was that role where they could call me and they can ask me things. I knew my role as a godmother, and I had to play that between my godchild and her mother. I had to play that role real hard, and that was also what helped me reflect on my relationship with my mother, and also helped me reflect on my relationship with my own child. So sometimes as parents, we have to understand that we're not going to be the end all be all. And the best parent is the one that allows their kids to learn from other people. Because I can't teach you everything.
Right.
I can't teach you. I can't give you all experiences because I haven't experienced everything.
Yeah. And I think one of those things about for all the negative we see on social media, we do see things that are positive. Switch up your algorithm. You know what I'm saying? Like, love the things that speak positivity and happiness, and don't feed into the things that don't speak such clear messages about things that fall into that space, because it's really easy to allow your mind to manipulate. Your mind is very powerful, and it manipulates your whole body into thinking things are happening that are not really happening. But I just really want to social media is not going anywhere. The access is becoming more and more. You know, I saw another article. Well, do we call them article? I saw another post about the wonderful earbuds, and you put the earbuds in, and now they're tapping into how your brain activates. And I said, they won't get much out of the US because we're not activating our brains over here. That's what my take was. My take was, well, I don't know what they're gonna get out of the United States of these Americas, because we don't think anymore.
But let me throw this notion out at you about the whole social media experience. Remember, it's based on followers. Now, let's get into the notion of following. So, I mean, for all how I was raised, I was definitely not raised to be a follower. I was raised to think outside of the way she wanted me to think, but I was still raised to think.
Right.
But the whole notion of this is to amass followers. So one thing that I studied, because I did study leadership, you know, that's in my everyday life. I studied leadership, but the great leaders amass great followers, right? And that's their purpose, to amass followers.
Right.
But can we talk about the people that we following? And so actually, I'm even skillful in my own social media. Mostly my social media is to be social amongst people I know. So I don't even get into idolizing and following and being obsessive about other people. But
correct.
Again, this whole notion of following, you're following somebody. So if you're following them, they're supposed to be leading you. And is that what you want leading you?
Again, discernment, the thought process, cognitive thinking. You have to go through that process. What do you want to have amassed in front of your face? What do you want to wake up to in the morning? What do you want to see? It goes back to what you said in the very beginning. How do you allow for this network to create or control the narrative in your life? Right? My algorithm ain't nothing but stickers and pens. Music.
You know what mine is. Mine is sun, moon, stars.
Purple
And
horseshoes. Nails, because you know that's my thing. That's about where my algorithm stops. But I say that to say that that post this morning, it threw me because it was the first thing that I saw after I said my prayers. It was the first thing that I saw, and I immediately went into even where we think we have control, we don't. Because I send people messages all day long, things that I think are funny, things that I think are interesting, things that I think just speak to other things that I think I have multiple groups of people that I send different things to. But I just thought to myself, if I at 48 received this kind of message and it affected my brain to say, is this real or is this not real? It made me wonder, would a child see this, a younger child, college, high school, whatever, see this? What would they think? Would they get utterly paranoid? Would it heighten the word that they use all over the place nowadays, anxiety? Right? These are words that we use now way more than we used before.
Yes.
And it just made me think about it. As we move into this space, we're getting towards the end of the school year. Kids are about to graduate. There's going to be a lot of travel, a lot of movement, kids starting new jobs in new towns for the first time. And all of these things are at their fingertips. All of that affects how you move. All of that affects whether or not you take a job in another state versus go back home.
But let's go back to your notion of perception versus reality, because again, on a lot of these social media platforms, if you are, looking for a job and your algorithm is being fed with all of these, oh, it's so easy to make money doing this. It's so easy to do this. It's so easy to do that. And when they literally get in there and it's not that easy, that's where that anxiety comes in. That's where, the whole imposter syndrome piece comes in. Yeah. Now you got to deal with a whole bunch of mental things that you didn't necessarily have to if you didn't create that anxiety for yourself.
Yep. A lot of them are afraid to step into the real world because they're afraid. They don't know what to do.
And I think how we can wrap this up and sum this up. Because we're actually going to be posted on social media. We want people to hear what it is that we're saying, and we want them to perceive it as reality. But what we can wrap this into is basically, at certain points, you're going to have to tune out.
Come on. And that's what it is. At certain points, you have to know when to tune in and when to tune out. Some of us call it check in and check out, discernment. And that wraps it up right there. That wraps it up right there. When to go and when not to go. When to play and when to press pause.
But then, at that point, remember, we came up in a time where you could get punished. You got too much of this, take it away.
Punishment. Do kids get punished anymore? Do kids?
I tried.
Honey, I put myself in punishment nowadays.
I tried, and you know what? Because I spent so much time on punishment during my teenage years, I'm like, no, ma'am, I did it, I said it, I own it.
That's so funny. But you did it with the knowledge base, the understanding where you were coming from. I think that was really good. I didn't want to come from a whole point of, how much time people spend on social media and how much time people do this. I didn't want to do that. I'm very happy that people are acknowledging mental health and how important it is. But I really just wanted to come from, if I saw this one post today, there is a child who saw that one post and went down the rabbit hole. And what did going down that rabbit hole do for them? Did they say stop? Did they say, oh, this is just interesting and keep it moving? Did they get nervous about it? Did they call their parents? Did they start crying? Like, what did they do? And hopefully there's a parent out there who had the conversation similar to the one we had about, honey, you got to have some discernment. You got to know and recognize when things are real and when they're not real. You got to understand that you can't control the narrative. You can't control everything that's around you. The best thing you can do is control who you are and make sure that you move in the best way that suits you. And that's where I think I really wanted to come from with this message.
Yes, I agree.
That's it. That's it right there. Boom, done. Mic drop. Deuces. And it's a wrap. Wait a minute. Nothing to it. Strike a pose. There's nothing to it. Vogue.